and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be continuing with my college football game-by-game prediction and roster preview videos with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So Notre Dame returns the most production in the country at 72%. So starting on the offensive side of the ball, they averaged 38 points per game last year, and that's really good. But they did benefit some from an easy schedule, but I expect them to average a similar amount of points per game to that this year. And at quarterback, they're in very good shape with C.J. Carr coming back, likely future NFL quarterback. Started all 12 games for them last year and had 2,741 yards passing and completed a good 66.6% of his throws and had a really good 9.4 yards per throw, averaging through 24 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions. The only problem with Carr, though, is he's no dual threat quarterback. But at wide receiver, they return Jordan Faison, who will be their go-to wide receiver again this year, and he's really good. He's going to play in the NFL. He had last year 49 catches for 640 and 4 touchdowns, averaging 13.1 a catch, and I expect him to put up even bigger numbers this year. But Notre Dame is going to need some other wide receivers to step up, because I expect, Notre Dame will continue to be more of a running team than a passing team, because that's how they've always been. I do expect, because they lose 2 first-round running backs, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, for them to throw the football a little more than they did last year. But running back, I think, is the easiest position to replace in college football right now. Because if you have a good offensive line, which I think Notre Dame's going to have at least a top 5 offensive line in college football, even if your running backs aren't that good, you're still probably going to be able to run the football pretty well. And I don't think Notre Dame can replace Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price, especially not Jeremiah Love. I do not think that Notre Dame is going to have any issues running the football this season, because they've got 3 starters coming back on an offensive line that only allowed 12 sacks last year and helped them average 203.4 rushing yards per game and average 5.7 yards per run. So they returned both starting guards. At left guard, Anthony Knapp, who did allow 31 quarterback pressures last year. That number does need to go down, but he's only allowed 1 sack, and he's a third-year starter. And they return at right guard Gerby Lambert, who started all 12 games for them last year and only allowed 1 sack and 10 total quarterback pressures. And they returned center Ashton Craig, who only played in 6 games last year because of a season-ending injury, but in those 6 games only allowed 2 sacks and 9 quarterback pressures. And they've got plenty of talent to where they should be fine at the tackle spots too. So now on the defensive side, Notre Dame was really good here last year too, giving up only 17.1 points per game on average, and I think their defense will be even better than it was last year. So on their defensive line, against the run, they were really good a year ago, giving up only 100.1 rushing yards per game on average, and I expect similar to that this year. And this is a defensive line that's going to have no issue getting after the quarterback. They've got Bryce Young coming back, who played in all 12 games as a rotational player and had 20 tackles, 2 sacks, 28 total quarterback pressures, and 3 pass breakups. He'll likely be moving to a starting role this year. And they've got Babacar Traore coming back, who started 11 games for them last year, missed one due to an injury, but had 37 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 31 total quarterback pressures, and a forced fumble. And they've got Jason Ione coming back, who had last year 26 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 17 total pressures, and a pass breakup. And they bring in a highly rated portal defensive lineman from Pittsburgh who's expected to start, Francis Breua, or whatever his name is. He started all 13 games for Pitt last year and had 36 tackles, a sack, and 20 total pressures, and a forced fumble. This is going to be one of the best defensive lines in college football again. And at linebacker, I wouldn't say they have the best starters, but I think this is probably the deepest linebacker group in college football. So they returned Drake Bowen, a third-year starter for them at linebacker, who had last year 67 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 4 pass breakups, and 17 total quarterback pressures. And Jaden Osbury, who had last year 51 tackles and 2 sacks and 13 total pressures and a forced fumble. And they return Kingston Voluma Asa, who didn't start any games last year but played in 11 games as a rotational player and did a really good job, having 48 tackles, 3 sacks, 23 total quarterback pressures, and an interception and 2 pass breakups. And they've got Jalen Sneed coming back, who had last year as a rotational player in 12 games, 35 tackles, 3 sacks, 12 quarterback pressures, and a forced fumble. Now in the secondary, I think this is going to be a top 5 secondary in college football. They gave up on average 213.4 passing yards per game a year ago, and I think they're going to be a lot better than that this year. So at cornerback, they returned Leonard Moore, who I think is the best cornerback in the country. He's going to be an early first-round draft pick in the next NFL draft. So he's a third-year starter for Notre Dame, and he's been All-American both years at Notre Dame. So last year he was limited to 10 games because of an injury, but still had 31 tackles, 5 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, 7 pass breakups, and a forced fumble.
Since those first couple of games of the season. Lardy with a snap, and passes picked off. Leonard Moore's turn to go the distance.
And they've got Christian Gray coming back, who's a third-year starter also for Notre Dame at corner. Last year in 12 games, he had 17 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 11 pass breakups. And they bring in a transfer corner from Colorado, but he is a really good player, DJ McKinney. He's played and started 22 games these past 2 years for Colorado and had 97 tackles, 14 pass breakups, 4 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, and a forced fumble. And then at safety, they're going to be really good too. They've got Bronte Johnson, who was limited to 10 games last year, I guess, because of an injury, but he was freshman All-American with 48 tackles, 4 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, and 3 pass breakups. And they've got Don Schuler coming back for a third season as a starting safety for Notre Dame. And he had last year 53 tackles and 5 pass breakups and 2 interceptions and a sack and 2 forced fumbles. So now for the game-by-game predictions, starting with Wisconsin on a neutral field. So Wisconsin used to have a program identity similar to Notre Dame's. with a big physical offensive and defensive linemen that were getting drafted, and a couple of NFL running backs and good defense. But under Luke Fickell, their identity has changed to an average defense with an offense that can't even get a first down. Now, I do like the transfer quarterback that Wisconsin brought in, Colton Joseph, I believe is his name, from Old Dominion. So we'll see if he can help them change that. But the only way I could see Notre Dame lose this game is if they just don't show up. And I think you know what I mean by that. Of course, the team will show up for the game, but where they don't play anywhere close to their ceiling, like against Northern Illinois a couple of years ago. And I can't imagine that happening because it's the opener, and Notre Dame's coming off what turned out to be a pretty disappointing season, even though they had a good year because they missed out on the college football playoff. And whether you agree with that or not, Notre Dame does not agree with that. So I think that's going to motivate them even more this season. And there's a big coaching and talent advantage for Notre Dame in this game. So I do not see Notre Dame letting Wisconsin hang around in this one. I think Notre Dame wins this one by at least 3 touchdowns. And of course, they'll beat Rice easily. That'll be one of the name your score kind of games for Notre Dame where they'll be able to play their backups at the whole second half, most likely. So now at Michigan State, this is going to be a blowout win for Notre Dame, probably by like 25 points. I can't imagine Notre Dame letting Michigan State hang around for more than a quarter of this game. By the start of the fourth quarter, Notre Dame should have a comfortable enough lead to put in their backups. There's just too much of a coaching and talent advantage for Notre Dame for them to lose this game, in my opinion. So now Purdue in the so-called rivalry game. So I think this will be at least a 30-point win for Notre Dame. Probably like a 40-point win. It'll be a complete domination from start to finish because Notre Dame is on a completely different universe right now than Purdue is when it comes to coaching and talent. Notre Dame will probably be playing their backups at the start of the second half of this game. And now on the road at North Carolina. So North Carolina, I've not researched their roster a ton, but if I had to guess, I'd say they're probably a little bit better than Michigan State and for sure better than Purdue. But I can't imagine Notre Dame letting North Carolina hang around for more than a quarter of this game. Now, North Carolina, they do have some talent on the roster, but Marcus Freeman is a way better coach than Bill Belichick is. And by the start of the fourth quarter, Notre Dame should have a comfortable enough lead to put in their backups for this one. So now Stanford. So Stanford, I'd say, is probably a little bit better than Purdue is, but they will not be good enough to be of any challenge to Notre Dame. I expect Notre Dame to win this game by about 4 touchdowns and be able to put in their backups by the start of the fourth quarter of the game. And these 4 games in a row of Michigan State, Purdue, North Carolina, and Stanford, even though their Power 4 opponents, that Notre Dame is going to have such a line of scrimmage advantage over all of them to where they're going to push them around so bad that none of those teams are going to have a chance of making it competitive at all. So now on the road at BYU. So for the first time of this season, Notre Dame will have a team that can actually give them a coaching challenge. and a line of scrimmage challenge. I love the coach at BYU, Kalani Sitake, and he was actually Penn State's first choice to replace James Franklin, not Matt Campbell. But if you look at BYU last season, they were a really good team too, but the two losses they had were to Texas Tech in blowouts where they were not very competitive in either game. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, Texas Tech was a playoff team, and that is true. Texas Tech was a really good team too last year, but when you saw them in the playoffs, it was obvious they were still nowhere close to being a serious national title contender. So imagine how far off BYU would have been from being a real contender in the college football playoff had they gotten in. And Notre Dame very much, I think, has the roster to be able to win the whole thing this year. And while BYU does have a lot coming back, and I know that was last year's BYU team, they might get a little bit better than they were last year, but not enough to win this game. Got Notre Dame beating BYU in a competitive but not extremely close game. And of course, Notre Dame will beat Navy in a big blowout win. They'll push Navy around at the line of scrimmage on both sides all day long. So now Miami, the biggest game of Notre Dame's regular season and one of college football's biggest games of the regular season. So I'm pretty sure you think it makes the most sense to pick Notre Dame to win this game because they're the home team playing against a team with about an even roster as them, and it's a revenge game very much for Notre Dame because this is the game that kept them out of the college football playoff a year ago. But Marcus Freeman has lost at least one home game every year that he's been Notre Dame's head coach. And Marcus Freeman has been a clear upgrade over Brian Kelly as Notre Dame's head coach. Like I've said before, he recruits better than Kelly did at certain positions. He's a much better game time coach, and he's a better player developer than Kelly is. But one thing that he's not been able to do yet as Notre Dame's head coach that Kelly was able to do a couple of times is go 12-0. And it hasn't been like he hasn't had his opportunities to do it because Notre Dame's had a pretty easy schedule every year that Marcus Freeman has been their head coach. But not quite this easy. 12-0, if he's going to do it, I think this would be the year for it. But if you look at the matchup, both teams' run defense, I think, is going to be so good that neither team is going to be able to get much of a run game going. And I think Miami matches up pretty well with Notre Dame on defense. I do think Notre Dame's a little bit better though, but I think this game's going to be won through the air, and I do trust that Darian Mintz a little more than C.J. Carr at quarterback, and I do like Miami's wide receivers a lot more than Notre Dame's on paper at least. I think this is going to be a very close game like last year, and the final score to it was 27-24 a year ago, and I think it'll be a similar score to that, but I think Miami having a little bit more balance on offense is what makes the difference, and they beat Notre Dame again. But they'll get to take out their frustration the next week on Boston College with a big blowout win. Boston College is like Purdue. Notre Dame's on a different universe than they are when it comes to coaching and talent. And Notre Dame, they'll just overpower Boston College all day at the line of scrimmage to where Boston College won't stand a chance of hanging around in the game. So now SMU. So SMU is going to have a really good offensive line again, so they may be able to get a little bit of a run game going in this one, and they do have the better quarterback, but I do expect Notre Dame's secondary to slow down Kevin Jennings and SMU's passing attack. And SMU's defensive line, though, I don't think they can slow down Notre Dame's run game. And I don't think that SMU's secondary can really slow down Notre Dame's passing attack with C.J. Carr either. So I think this will be somewhat competitive, but I think Notre Dame pulls away in the fourth quarter and wins it by about 2 touchdowns. And Notre Dame will end the season with a blowout win over Syracuse. The coach at Syracuse, I don't really know what to think of him right now because he's been there 2 years and had one good year in his first year and then one terrible year in his second year. But what I do know is he's not near the coach that Marcus Freeman is, and he doesn't have near as good a staff as Freeman does. This is one of those games where Notre Dame should be able to do what they like to do, which is play really good defense, shut down Syracuse's offense, and run the football a whole bunch and control the line of scrimmage on both sides and chew up the clock. So my final prediction for Notre Dame in 2026 is 11-1. So this will for sure get them into the college football playoff, and they'll probably get to host a first round playoff game. So that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.